I'm in River Rouge, Michigan for this video. River Rouge is one of the more poverty-stricken Detroit suburbs. It's located downriver, just south of Detroit, borders it, and it's had a rough go. Let's check it out.
The best thing that River Rouge has going for it these days would be its cannabis stores. Weed and pizza. Yeah, that's 21st century freedom right there. But it's not just pot smoke that fills the air around River Rouge. The layers of oxygen that hover over the community today has long been some of the most polluted air that you'll find in all of the Midwest. Although, it's slightly better today as DTE closed their coal power plant back in 2021. The plant had been in operation here since 1958. So first things first, as the city is called River Rouge, but the river that it's named after is called the Rouge River. There's a few other names of places along the Rouge River that are referred to as River Rouge, like the historic Ford River Rouge complex. Alright, so with that out of the way, River Rouge is Detroit's southern neighbor. The suburb lost over half of its peak population a long time ago, in an ever-shrinking number. With that in mind, I have to admit that when I drove through, I was surprised that there wasn't a larger amount of blighted buildings, because usually when a place loses over half of their peak population, there's a lot of homes and other buildings that are falling apart, like what you'll see throughout most of Detroit's residential areas. But while there aren't that many abandoned buildings standing here in River Rouge today, there are a lot of empty lots. Most of them seem to have been bought by the owner of a neighboring property to give them a bigger yard, so that's all good and dandy. Anyway, there's several reasons why people keep leaving River Rouge. The majority of the residents here are living in extreme poverty. Not only are jobs hard to come by, but home values are among the lowest in the country. The biggest factor playing into all of that is the air quality. River Rouge is surrounded by facilities like the now retired DTE coal plant, which contributed to the matter for about 65 years. U.S. Steel has a huge operation on Zug Island, which is one of the few facilities in the U.S. that produces coke, an ingredient that not only helps create steel, but also heavily pollutes the surrounding air with toxic particles. There's more facilities too, like the Detroit Water and Sewerage Department on the opposite side of the Rouge River. The giant Marathon Petroleum facility is less than a mile from River Rouge's northwest border. Chemical tanks line River Rouge's shoreline with the Rouge River through a Shell oil facility. Plus, there's another oil company that has operations on the opposite side of the Marathon facility. While DTE might not run their River Rouge coal power plant any longer, they proudly have this sign on display. Yeah, it's going to take a long time before this area gets cleaned up. This is Boulanger Park. It costs $5 for non-River Rouge residents to enter. Well, I was able to cough up $5 and I went in to see what the park was about.
I'm here at River Rouge's Detroit River Park, and you can definitely smell Zug Island, no doubt about it. I'm guessing that you can smell it worse on other days. It's not that bad right now, but you can definitely smell it. Over there is Canada, right across the river right there. The Detroit River has definitely gotten cleaner in the last several decades, but I still wouldn't eat fish out of here. There's people that fish here all the time, apparently. I wouldn't do it, though, unless it's catch and release.
Yeah. Say no to bottom-feeding catfish from not only the Detroit River, but also from the lower stretch of the Rouge River. Back in the day, the Rouge River was so heavily polluted with oil and chemicals that it caught on fire. Much is made of the Cuyahoga River fire in Cleveland. Well, It happened here too, although the one here wasn't as destructive as the one in Ohio was. On October 9th, 1969, a construction worker dropped a torch into the river on accident. That was shortly after the Shell Oil Company spilled 3,000 gallons of oil into the Rouge River. Flames were said to have been as high as 50 feet above the Rouge. Imagine if we had drones in 1969. That would have been one heck of a capture. Maybe an AI tool can recreate that for us. I mean, you see all kinds of made-up crap now on social media reels all the time. Well, today officials say that you can canoe the Rouge River through its most polluted stretch, and contact with the water won't harm you. Go ahead and paddle around Zug Island, though, and the air that you breathe in will most definitely harm you. Speaking of Zug Island, here comes the bride, all dressed in black.
Racist.
Zug Island wasn't always an island. It's named after Samuel Zug. Back in 1859, Zug purchased the 334 acres of what is now Zug Island. Originally, he was going to build a home here, but the land was too swampy. In 1888, he approved a canal on the south side of his property to be constructed, which made it easier for ships further upstream to reach the Detroit River. In 1891, he sold the island to George Brady and Charles Noble for $300,000. They intended to use the land as an industrial dumping ground for all of the factories in Detroit's Delray neighborhood, back when it was hopping. They instead found salt deposits underneath the island when they started digging one day, so salt wells were constructed shortly after. To see a video on Detroit's Delray neighborhood, you can check out this link here. The salt on Zug Island was used to support other manufacturers in the area through the manufacturing of glass and other products. With industrial growth rapidly expanding in Detroit, however, through the first part of the 20th century, steel production began on the island in 1902. Steel became a product in high demand during that era, and it didn't take long for the entire island to be made up of steel production facilities. Some of the blast furnaces on the island are 130 years old. There were as many as 16,000 steel plant workers on Zug Island during its peak in the 1940s. Only 500 people work on Zug Island today, though, but there were as many as 1,500 as recently as 2020. Great Lakes Works is the name of the plant, operated by U.S. Steel. The company owns a few other facilities south of here, one in River Rouge on the opposite side of the park, and one in Ecorse off of One Quality Drive. Is the name of that street named Quality Drive after the term air quality? Who knows? Most of the space within the facilities here, owned by Great Lakes Steel, are idle. Here's a photo of Zug Island at night in 1973. Temperatures in the furnaces at the plant can reach as high as 2,000 degrees. Most people associate Zug Island with the city of Detroit, but it's actually a part of the city of River Rouge. That's right, although you do have to go through Detroit to enter it by car. I'm sure that Detroit people won't fight River Rouge over Zug Island, though. They have enough problems to handle already. Back in 2020, however, U.S. Steel sent a notice to their 1,545 employees on Old Zuggy saying that they plan on idling their operations. That hasn't completely happened yet, but layoffs impacted 1,000 workers shortly after that announcement. While for a long time the steel plant on Zug Island was crucial to the local economy, supporting thousands upon thousands of blue-collar, decently paid work, it was also a very dangerous job. As recently as 2018, there was an explosion on Zug Island that injured 15 workers. Many men have died on the job here too over the years. In fact, 3 lost their lives on the clock from 2013 to 2018. It was even more dangerous 100 years ago when safety codes and regulations weren't what they are now. Much has been made about the tough life of working in the auto plants in the area back in the day, but conditions were much worse in the steel mills. Over the years, residents in River Rouge and in Windsor across the Detroit River have said that you can hear a humming noise at night coming from Zug Island. They say that it's an electronic vibration sort of noise. Residents of both communities have also suffered from higher than average rates of asthma. Cancer risks are higher too. In fact, some people refer to this area as Cancer Alley. The EPA has consistently found high levels of ammonia, lead, manganese, mercury, and ethylene being emitted from Zug Island. So you add that into all of the emissions from the nearby Marathon facility and the DTE coal power plant that had been running here for a long time until just recently, and you have a mixing bowl of just all of these pollutants in the air hovering around River Rouge, Ecorse, far southwest Detroit like the Delray area, and Melvindale even, and it just makes it the most polluted area in all of Michigan. This is Jefferson Avenue, the town's main drag. Most of River Rouge's commercial zoning is located along the 1.5-mile stretch of Jefferson Avenue that goes through town. Today you can seemingly find more cannabis stores than anything else, including grocery stores in which there's only a few of them left in River Rouge. All but one of them resembles the inside of a small gas station. Heck, there's more liquor stores in town than there are grocery stores, so yeah, that's not good. Well, River Rouge is an extremely poverty-stricken community. A few years ago, I made a video on Highland Park, Michigan, calling it the worst city in the country. To this day, it has 1 million views, but in it, I talked about how Highland Park was the poorest city in the country, with a median household income of only $18,000 per year. Updated stats show that Highland Park's median household income is now $30,000 per year, which is still really bad, but River Rouge's numbers are lower than $30,000 per year, and they were lower than that too a few years ago, making River Rouge the poorest city in Michigan at the time of me uploading this video. I'll show you the exact numbers in a few minutes. Speaking of numbers, the River Rouge School District has been in the news more often than they would like to be over the last decade or so. The River Rouge School Board offices were raided by the FBI back in 2012. They even canceled school on that day. Forget snow days, how about FBI raid days? Then recently fired Superintendent Dr. Carlos Lopez was suing the school board for a breach of contract. Lopez was fired after asking the state of Michigan to investigate how River Rouge was spending Title I funds, which was cash that was intended for children of low-income families. Well, the state's investigation found that River Rouge violated several rules, and that's when the FBI came into play. Then school board president Valvita Reese refused to speak with Channel 4, Detroit's NBC affiliate, moments after the FBI raid. And she even had a knight in shining armor who was threatening Channel 4's reporter who was trying to speak to her. Anyway, Dolores Reed of the faraway Detroit suburb of Southfield was the director of state and federal programs for the River Rouge School District at the time, and she was sentenced to 5 years in prison on accepting a bribe and mail fraud. Reed accepted thousands of dollars in cash for giving preferential treatment to a company that provided tutoring services for the school district. Now, of course, that's a 12-year-old story at the time of me uploading this video, but only 5 years ago, River Rouge's schools were exposed again. This time it was for luxurious travel expenses. Then River Rouge School Superintendent Dr. Derek Coleman, who is still the school superintendent today, was questioned about why he and other top administrators needed to spend more than $288,000 on out-of-state travel during a 6-year stretch, especially when teachers in the school district took a 15% pay cut back in 2011 but only received half of that back at that point in 2019. Michigan state law requires districts to post on their website certain financial expenses, including travel. In 2019, River Rouge spent way more on travel than any of the other neighboring districts. For comparison, neither Allen Park, Ecorse, Melvindale, Southgate, or Wyandotte spent any money on out-of-state travel in 2019. Lincoln Park only spent $2,500. $288,000 over 6 years averages out to be $48,000 per year. All of that for a district that has 75% of its students on free or reduced lunches. Heck, $48,000 per year, that's more than twice the amount that some of these households make in River Rouge. Also, I'm not saying that Michigan is perfect, but Michigan is a state that has two very highly ranked large public universities in both Michigan State University and the University of Michigan. Now, I know that they're not Harvard or anything, but a school district like River Rouge doesn't have to spend crazy amounts of money on traveling to places like Vegas, Orlando, LA, Nashville, or DC to get professional training for their staff. They can find plenty of it in their own state. So Coleman saying that they don't believe that they can find locally what's offered nationally is crazy Mountain Dew drinking hilljack talk. I equivalent that to someone buying an oversized Ford F-150 when they don't ever haul anything other than their own 2,000 pounds of ego. And if you don't believe me, head several miles southeast into Indiana, and you'll know what I'm talking about. Otherwise, there's a pending lawsuit against the River Rouge Police Department by a former officer. In December of 23, Rosa Holly claimed how there weren't any facilities for women to change clothes. In River Rouge, the police officers are also firefighters. Holly went on to claim how the director of public safety and another official made false claims against her and created a hostile working environment. Officers above Holly sent her text messages that threatened her, asked her out on dates, and made harassing comments. Fox 2 called River Rouge's police chief and the mayor for comments on the matter, and of course, no response from either. Anyway, if you look up any other recent story coming out of River Rouge across media outlets, you won't find much other than crime stories. It looks like a lot here, but 7 headlines down from the top on Detroit's Fox 2 page, and you're all the way back in 2022. Since I talked a lot about the high school, just up the road from here is River Rouge High School, home of the Panthers. They might have had a few corrupt higher-up employees over the years, but at least they've been good at football and basketball in recent years. The school doesn't fare very well academically, though, and we can go over that in Chris's livability score at the end of the video. Now on to the economic stats, as River Rouge hit its peak population back in 1950 at 20,000 people. Safe to say that River Rouge will never see that many people again. The population decline has been among the fastest seen in not only the state of Michigan, but throughout the entire country. Today, the population is below 7,000. The median household income is terribly low for 2024 standards at $26,000 per year. Only 8% of adults 25 and older hold a bachelor's degree or higher, and the median value of owner-occupied housing units is $49,000, while the poverty rate is a mind-blowing 44%. On to the crime rates now, and the violent crime rate is twice the national average, while the property crime rate is slightly above the national average. Now time to talk about the history of the suburb, as River Rouge became a village in 1899 and then a city in 1922. The transition from a village to a city helped it from being annexed by Detroit. A month later, Detroit was successful in annexing the narrow strip of land just west of River Rouge in what is now the Boynton neighborhood. The community was called River Rouge from the beginning. The name Rouge River in French means Red River. The entire Detroit area has strong French roots, especially along the Detroit River. For a brief time, the area was all farmland, before quickly being taken over by European settlers who came to the area by what was then referred to as the River Road, which in modern days is called Jefferson Avenue. The River Road was the first highway built through this part of Wayne County. Both the Rouge and Detroit rivers early on provided to be great assets for agriculture before transitioning into industrial waterways. Industrial opportunists saw the site as being a great location for manufacturing as it sat between the iron ore mining in northern Michigan and the coal mining in Appalachia. Early industries primarily included shipbuilding and the steel plant on Zug Island that I went over earlier. Great Lakes Engineering Works was the big shipbuilding company in town. They also had a presence in the neighboring suburb of Ecorse. The new shipbuilding plant opened in River Rouge in 1903, not long after the steel plant was constructed on Zug Island. Railroads were constructed to serve the massive shipbuilding yards shortly after its founding. Some of the largest ships at the time that had navigated the Great Lakes waters were constructed in River Rouge. The most well-known ship that was associated with River Rouge was the Edmund Fitzgerald. The ship was built in Ecorse, but it was christened in River Rouge in 1958 before being set off into the waterways that same year. The ship famously wrecked in Lake Superior during a storm in November 1975. It was actually on its way from Superior, Wisconsin, heading towards Zug Island to deliver cargo when it came across gale-force winds of up to 100 miles per hour. 35-foot waves crashed into the ship along with a whiteout blizzard. The ship ended up snapping in half before sinking 500 feet to the bottom of Lake Superior. The U.S. Coast Guard was unsuccessful in saving any of the 29 men who were on board. Pieces of the ship had been recovered over the years and are on display at various shipwreck-themed museums across Michigan. Well, people, it is now that time. You can't always trust the bottom feeders in the Rouge River, just like how you can't always trust the economic future of downriver, but you can always trust Chris's livability score. The first category is education. River Rouge High School is ranked towards the bottom out of all of Michigan's high schools. Students score tremendously poorly in math, reading, and science. They're all in single digits in terms of proficiency among the students. It gets a 3 out of 20. Crime is a problem in River Rouge, but you can find other communities in Metro Detroit with higher crime. It gets a 6 out of 20. Downtown is next, and downtown River Rouge consists of nothing other than a fancy-looking City Hall building with another collection of older buildings across the street at Jefferson and Coolidge. It's nothing really, and it gets a 2 out of 20. Next up is the economy, which is extremely poor. Not only are nearly all of the factory jobs from the past time gone, but there's little to no hope that River Rouge will ever be a thriving community in the future. Nobody is going to want to invest in River Rouge with the pollution being what it is. People tend to, stay away from these kinds of areas these days given the knowledge that we know now of increased cancer risks in heavily polluted areas. The economy gets a 2 out of 20. When it comes to the recreation, I want to give this some context, because back in the 1980s, both Canada and the US joined together to try to clean up the Great Lakes from all of the pollution from the industrial era. They identified 43 areas of concern within the Great Lakes watershed, and 12 of them are still in Michigan. The Rouge River Area of Concern is the biggest offender in the state, and while the EPA claims that you can safely play and swim in the Rouge River, to each their own. I wouldn't do it, especially when the air smells like a rat-infested garbage can. It gets a 3 out of 20. Next up is history, and all of that is tied within the steel and shipbuilding industries. Most people in Michigan have heard of the Edmund Fitzgerald and associate it with being one of the more well-known shipwrecks in the Great Lakes. Plus, for better or worse, Zug Island has been a local landmark since blast furnaces were built on it over 100 years ago. The Rouge River Fire was a tremendously significant event as well when it comes to the formation of the Clean Water Act of 1972, which forced both the US and Canada to, clean up their act when it comes to industrial pollutants. History gets a 16 out of 20. Amenities is next, and there are essentially no amenities in River Rouge unless you're a pothead. You have to drive 15 to 20 minutes to the northwest until you get to a sizable shopping center. It gets a 2 out of 20. Last up is cost of living, and I'm giving it an 18 out of 20. Despite the $50,000 median home value price, the reason being is the property taxes in River Rouge are just flat out stupid. Like, mad stupid. The property taxes in River Rouge are higher than Detroit's property taxes, and that's saying a lot. Tax on a River Rouge home that's valued at $100,000 is going to cost a homeowner $4,200 over the course of a year. Yeah, no thanks. I don't want cancer and a crazy high stupid property tax bill. The only worst city for property taxes in the region would be Ecorse, just south of River Rouge. All in all, the Chris Livability score for River Rouge, Michigan is 52 out of 160, putting it as the worst ranked city in Michigan that I've done so far. Look, if you're looking to rent or buy in River Rouge, Michigan, don't. If you do, after watching this video, then that's on you. The air here is filthy, and if you value your health, you wouldn't move here, point blank. It's why people are continuing to leave at rates faster than anywhere else in the state. I would leave too, as soon as I could if I grew up here. You can't blame them. Well, hey, I made a video on Detroit's far southwest neighborhood, and I talked more about the Marathon Refinery in that video. The Marathon Refinery borders River Rouge to the northwest, so I encourage you to watch that video right here if you want to know more about the industrial history of this area. I'll see you in that video. Peace.